All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this year's last webinar from Green Story. And we have a set of very special guests today. The webinar is on transparency in fashion from talk to action with Mantis World, Coyuchi, and Textile Exchange. These are brands and institutions which have really walked the talk in terms of transparency, and we'll be diving in deep on that today. We'll talk everything about transparency from supply chains, the challenges and the opportunities, and why these companies went the way they did. Um, for those who don't know, Mantis World and Koichi were also the winners of the 2021 Ryan Young Climate Plus Award by Textile Exchange in the Climate Leaders category. So these truly are amazing pioneering brands and a great institution in Textile Exchange, which is enabling all of these brands to succeed. Uh, a little bit about me. I'm the co-founder of Green Story. My name is Akhil. And at Green Story, what we do, our focus is on enabling brands to show their positive impact and go carbon neutral. So we work on transparency, we work on life cycle assessment, we work on helping brands showcase all the good work that they're doing to their customers, the suppliers, to everyone. And the goal for us as a company is to empower 1 billion consumers to show their impact and ultimately make choices that are better for the planet and for generations to come. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful panelists, and we can start with a quick round of introductions. Prama, I'm going to call on you first, and if you can give a quick introduction about yourself and also talk a little bit about transparency, what it means for you and for your company.
Sure. Thanks, Akhil. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm delighted to be here. And thanks everyone for joining. I know it's the run up to Christmas and everybody's busy right now. So I'm Prama. I'm the CEO and founder of a business to business brand called Mantis World. We basically supply the printwear industry with blank garments that are ready to decorate. So our clients are independent fashion brands to big corporates, merchandise, souvenirs, uniforms, etc. And our mission is to bring the most sustainable fibers that we can commercially bring to market. Transparency for me is something that I think is something that evolves and has evolved and continues to evolve. So my background actually is coming from a textile family. My grandfather built textile mills across East Africa, and I grew up in and out of them and saw basically a vertical textile mill, and we know where the cotton farmers were. So it was completely transparent, and I thought nothing of it. I thought that was normal. And it was only when we started sourcing from other locations that we realized that what I took for granted was not normal at all. So we felt that it was important to look into our supply chain and really understand who was making things. And this is going back to the time when Uzbek cotton was a big problem. And we realized that, well, if we needed to make sure we weren't using cotton from Uzbekistan in our supply chain, then we really needed to know who was making our cotton. And so we started on this sort of transparency map that we did internally. So we knew internally what we were doing and who everybody was along the chain. And it's only recently that we can now show that publicly, more externally, with the help of Akhil, you guys and your great developers at Green Story. We can actually show the entire transparency of our supply chain by a simple QR code in every garment that you can scan with your smartphone, and you can see exactly where every stage of production is. So that's where we are now, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what transparency will mean to us in the next 5 years.
All right, thank you, Prama. Margot, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Margot, and I'm the Director of Sustainability and Sourcing at Coyuchi. We're a multi-channel brand based in San Francisco, and we sell organic home textiles. We exclusively use natural fibers for the products that we design and sell. Pram, I love what you just said about transparency, because thinking about this topic, it's definitely an evolution. So I've been at Coyuchi now for a number of years, and I would say at the beginning of when I got here, we had a very strong knowledge of who the vendors were and continue to be that make our product. So as an organic brand, there's a level that you are sort of, that's built into the organic system, which operates on a model of traceability. So Coyuchi is a GOTS certified brand. Over 90% of what we design and sell is made from organic cotton. So through GOTS, there's a paper trail connecting every step along the chain, every business entity within the supply chain for our products. But there are limitations to that. So what we get is really sort of the provenance of the material. We understand who, again, as I said, the vendor is, but then transparency actually enables a much richer and deeper way of working. It allows you to really get a shared understanding of the who, what, where, so you can actually begin to address more of what matters. So at Coyuchi, we have a number of different goals that have evolved over the course of my being here. We have goals around sustainable materials, around regenerative. We have you've developed climate goals. And so the most meaningful work we're doing, we see value coming from transparency being built in. So traceability is still an important part of the matrix of how we work, but transparency has really allowed us to have see a lot more benefit throughout the business. And I think the program that was celebrated through the Ryan Young Award from Textile Exchange is a great example of that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Margot. And last but not least, Liesl.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Akhil, and lovely to be on this discussion with you all. And I can confess I was not part of the judging panel. So whilst I would have definitely voted these two amazing companies to win the awards, I can't say I was involved. So a big congratulations from me, Prama and Margot, for the great achievements of the Climate Plus Awards. Yeah, so my name's Liesl Truscott. I'm the director of our corporate benchmarking program and have been at Textile Exchange for over 10 years now. So seen a little bit of this evolution that Margot and Prama have both been talking about in terms of transparency. And the irony is, right, is that one of the big efficiencies of supply chains was to actually to commodify everything, right? To make everything quite anonymous, efficient, globalized. There was a competitive advantage in not knowing. So, fast tracking to now, we're still battling with this inbuilt efficiencies associated with, what we've managed to do with amazingly efficient supply chains and commodity markets, but we're really recognizing some of the losses and the risks associated with not having that transparency, and then of course the opportunities that we can get from it. So I think, yes, it is an evolution. Prama said, where will we be in 5 years' time? So that will be interesting. We're seeing a lot more tools develop and build that, take away some of that burden in terms of, being able to trace and track and build more transparency. But ultimately, it's what that transparency enables in terms of what you can do with having transparency through that supply chain, what that enables us to do. And then of course comes back to people and relationships and building trust and sort of figuring out how we can share that risk and reward. And I think that's where the transparency will really play itself out. But I'll stop there. Lots more to say, but let's hand it back to you, Akhil.
No, those were some fantastic points. I do want to jump in a little bit on like the jumping off points after transparency, where it leads to. But before that, Lisa, more specifically for you, I know you weren't involved in the committee, but I'd love to know about the Ryan Young Climate Plus Awards and the basis on the awards and what the Climate Leader Awards actually mean, and why these two deserving winners are so deserving.
Yeah, no, well, thanks, Akhil. Yes, it's a wonderful privilege to keep Ryan Young's great work and vision front and center of our Climate Plus strategy. That's absolutely key, and so it comes from a place of complete admiration for the vision that Ryan Young, who sadly passed away, brought to Textile Exchange, and we hold that in the center of our Climate Plus strategy. So what the awards are kind of focused around the three main criteria. And one is about, maintaining and building that commitment to what we've called Climate Plus. So the candidates had to demonstrate their commitment to climate and the associated biodiversity, soil, health, and water elements. And of course, that sort of even more holistic view of what we mean by a Climate Plus strategy. The second criteria was around being able to innovate and scale and replicate and literally accelerate this great work by bringing that innovation and then the third point is around the transparency, which of course is not only about being authentic and open and bringing that integrity to what a company's doing, but that massive opportunity to share and learn and collaborate, and all the collaboration is really, really, really key. Where can we completely reduce or eliminate competitions? I was talking at the start about this sort of competitive advantage, which was all about individualism, about, direct playoff with everybody else. Now we're recognizing that we can get so much further, so much quicker if we're actually, putting competition at that edge there. And I think both these, both Margot and Prama's companies have got an amazing competitive edge with where they've built their vision and the purpose of their organizations. But I think if we ask both of them, I'm pretty sure a lot of it will be about the collaboration that they've managed to build into their kind of culture in their companies. Set you guys up there for that one.
Yeah, let us ask them. Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I would totally agree with what you're saying, Liesl. I think so. The award for Coyuchi acknowledged a specific product that we launched in 2020 called the Full Circle Recycled Blanket. So it was a really exciting product where there were actually many years of collaboration involved. We worked with a few key partners, the Renewal Workshop. We have a blanket vendor in Germany, and then Recover brand. And so basically what we were able to accomplish all together was to figure out a way to take Coyuchi product that had been returned to us from customers, recycle it, blend it with virgin organic cotton, and make it into a new product, which was really exciting for a number of reasons. I think one of the biggest challenges was that usually with recycled product, just market available products are used in the recycling. Never before had Recover actually taken the brand's products back, recycled them into a material. So there's a lot of things that we had to figure out, but ultimately, for Coyuchi, we have a program, Second Home, where we're trying to really have this closed loop, and so the transparency was a key piece, of course, the traceability, but being able to work really closely together in a way that we don't necessarily work with partners on other products was really exciting, and something we're trying to emulate more throughout, our product assortment, whether recycled or not.
Prama, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you. I'm slightly embarrassed by all these plaudits. Thank you. But I think for us, we've just been in the space for so long and have been trying so hard to do our best. We've learned so much, and collaboration has really been part of it. For a small brand and a small company, we don't have access to the resources of huge CSR teams and big budgets. So it's really about trying to pull different actors into the room, into the conversation. And it doesn't matter if there are competitors or our suppliers or our clients or our other stakeholders across the industry and beyond. And I think for us, you know, I've been very involved with a few of the textile exchange groups, whether it's the Organic Cotton Roundtable Steering Committee or the Pan-Africa Sourcing Working Group, which I chair. That has been a real eye-opener in terms of how you can bring different actors together in a place where they feel safe to sort of speak their truth and be honest about what their challenges, what their opportunities are, so we can all as a sector benefit. I think for us, there's two key pieces that I think won us the award, and one was we signed up to the Sustainable Cotton Challenge back in 2017, I think it was, where the challenge was to get all your cotton sustainable by 2025, and we actually turned to fully organic by 2019. So in just 2 short years, everything went organic. And the other piece, of course, is about the transparency as well, and being able to show everybody along the chain of clients that we have. Our chain of clients is quite long because it's not just going to the consumer, it's going through several different organizations before it gets to the end wearer, is to be able to show the provenance of every step of the way. And I think what's really interesting is we're seeing, since we launched those QR codes with you, Akhil, we're seeing lots of our peers actually saying, oh, this is great, we need to do the same thing. We've seen a lot of interest. So it just makes us very proud that, you know, we kind of have brought this idea to an industry, and we're seeing it being taken up.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. So there's definitely a lot of benefits towards transparency, and I do want to cover that a little bit. But I mean, there's a reason why so many brands are not transparent, and there's a lot of challenges associated with it. You know, Margot, you talked about the GOT system, the traceability associated with that, the paper trails and tracking, the costs probably associated with all of that, then getting your suppliers on board. So as you were evolving with your brands towards being a lot more transparent in your messaging, in kind of understanding your supply chains, can you highlight a little bit more on what are some of the key challenges that you faced and how you overcame them? And Lisa, feel free to jump in here as to see how organizations like yours are also helping overcome those challenges. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I can. So I think for us, a big barrier to transparency was just in how the industry has been organized, in that we can get as far as tier 3 quite easily, which is back to the spinner level. But beyond that, it was very much more, as Liesl mentioned, a sort of a globalized commodity market. And although we were asking the questions and we were getting answers, we were never 100% convinced that all the answers we were getting were always accurate. And so even with, you know, systems like GOTS and, you know, OCS that we have as well, we can only get so far. It's been really quite difficult to get beyond that. And actually, what has helped us enormously there is talking with Textile Exchange, and particularly for those of you who know him, Amish, who's been really helpful in helping us to try and identify the tier 4 suppliers that we work with. And of course, there's, you know, again, the people that we meet through the Pan-Africa Working Group. We've got some really good connections there in terms of tier 4. So it's there's always a challenge, but there's always, I think, a way to solve it if you're patient and you ask for help.
Thank you for that, Prama.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think the way the industry has been set up and evolved, you know, there's also a behavioral aspect where you have just a very commercial mindset, or you find commercial mindsets. So there's an element of, choosing your partners very carefully, people who may be used to working in a more traditional way, but being open to trying to figure out new ways of working. I think one thing that we've seen that's been really challenging is just limited resources. So as Prama mentioned, we're also a relatively small brand. So there's just, bandwidth. There's a lot of manual work, as you mentioned, Akhil. Certifications like GOTS are very, document paperwork oriented. So a lot of time can be spent even just following up on the information on the document versus, having conversations with partners. And then there's just a lack, I think, of technology that sort of supports that system. So there's limitations in, how much it can evolve. There's a lot of work going into, what kind of technologies can facilitate that system, but also facilitate working differently. But ultimately, I think something I keep going back to is that transparency doesn't have to be a linear concept, whereas, the industry is really set up in a linear model. And so you just get these, you identify players through a chain. And we've just found that working that way, has its limitations.
Yeah, I would agree, Margot. I think we're in a really interesting time with transparency, I think, because there's been an explosion of tools in a way, new technologies, tracing devices, blockchain. We're the Textile Exchange, we're excited about our chain of custodies going digital and sort of electronically centralizing a lot of this data that will make large and small companies' lives a whole lot easier from that sort of burden in terms of being able to track data, track information, have information at the fingertips. I think that's a huge part of what we all need, and I think once again this is the some of the hurdles in terms of the culture of that level of openness and being able to sort of know who's who in everybody's supply chain. It's been really much kind of pitched as a competitive advantage not to have those relationships. So with that data and let's just say with the tools are on their own kind of journey in terms of being accessible and usable and available and that sort of thing to reduce the burden, then on the kind of parallel highly interconnected kind of pathway is the responsibility of how we use that data, of how we commit and build trust and commitments and shared value and knowing how we're going to reduce risk or maximize benefit or look at what human rights issues might show up when we do have that level of transparency. So really the maturity model associated with how we use data, that responsibility around data and how we respond to it is quite important, but also opens up so much opportunity. And I think one of the things that we will have to really keep in mind as an industry is not to divest from areas where we do see challenges. And Prama, just looking at the work you've done, you mentioned the Pan-Africa Working Group. There's huge challenges in we could spend a whole webinar, and I think we might have already, Akhil, talking about where the industry is at in terms of risk and opportunity and levels of development in Africa. But the point being is that having commitments to regions and diversifying our supply chains and making sure there's authenticity between the stories that we're telling our consumers and the data we're collecting. There's, as you can, there's so many layers of that that kind of system, if you like. And I think what Margot and Prama's been able to do through their companies is really commit to that innovation story and that partner story. And I think it's not all going to be a perfect outcome all the time, but what I'm seeing is that sort of maturity model moving towards, okay, how can we be the best partner in this situation? It might be that I say, but a company might have to divest if that's kind of the only option. But that transparency and opens up those dialogues and conversations to make quite significant changes. I'll stop there.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because like one thing I've noticed, I'm compared to the rest of you, I'm fairly new in the fashion space. I've only been focusing on this for the last 5 years. But one thing that I noticed is the attitude towards transparency has changed quite a lot in the last 5 odd years. It used to be incredibly niche, and something that I even remember somebody very early on in the fashion space saying it's a very hippie thing that they brought up. But it's definitely become more mainstream right now. So there has been a business case made for it, because it's probably starts with the sustainability officer, and then depending on the company, especially broader companies, and then moves up the chain and goes towards the CFO and all of these. So somebody somewhere made a good business case, and now it's become more of an industry standard. So when you're speaking within your companies, or as your companies have evolved, or even from what you see among your colleagues and networks, what has changed? Why are people moving towards transparency right now? And what's the, and this also relates to a question that came up on chat. What are the business case points that people are making to sell it within a company? Margot, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think at Coyuchi, there's, I would say, company-wide support for transparency. I think one thing that helps is that it's just been part of the company foundation and mission. That helps enormously. And then, of course, we all buy things, so we want to be able to, be a company that we'd all want to support. I think there are a number of reasons to be transparent in addition to that. So, Liesl mentioned and Prama mentioned, material goals. So, transparency is a really important part for our own sourcing initiatives when it comes to materials. One thing that we mentioned during the conversation prior to this in preparation was, around COVID-19. So I would think that the transparency we had with some of our partners really became a benefit. So because we sort of all knew that we'd be facing new challenges, working in different ways, having new restrictions, knowing who our partners are enabled or really showed us like the resilience that we had as a result of transparency, which I think is incredibly important, not just now, but moving forward with all the, myriad challenges we see just within, due to climate change. There's certainly a reputational element as well. So, there's always risk involved in various ways, particularly when it comes to sourcing organic materials. And so transparency there's a real argument for transparency for that reason. So yeah, and then I think the innovation piece that Liesl mentioned is something that has been really important to me. Being able to move forward some of our key objectives for the business, transparency is absolutely an important part of what will, allow us to be successful.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I don't have much to that. It was really well put, Margot. I think transparency brings legitimacy. And I'm sure this is something that we're going to be talking about a bit later, but I think there's a lot of sentiment from consumers that are seeing, huge companies very suddenly jump on bandwagons of being eco or being green or being ethical or whatever word we're using. And they're like, well, prove it. There is a huge amount of suspicion out there, I think. And so transparency allows you to actually just legitimize your claims and say, well, yeah, this is what I'm saying, and this is who we work with. So I think that's a very important business case. And I think, one of the advantages, for us here at Mantis World, a bit like Coyuchi, is we remain an owner-managed company. So that means we are able to put whatever we want at the heart of what we do. So for us, it is, not just transparency, but just responsible behavior and, kind of treating everybody the way that we'd like to be treated. And Akhil, it's funny that you talk about 5 years ago, people thought transparency was being a bit hippie-like. When I started my business 21 years ago, I was almost embarrassed to talk about sustainability or, ethics, because people would just assume I was not commercial, that I was just some liberal idealist hippie who, wanted to wear hemp caftans. So it's just changed so much. And so suddenly on its head, we're now seeing every big organization coming in and, shouting about their next big, project or goal or what have you on sustainability. And that's all great. There's some great work happening. But if you are not transparent about exactly what you mean, how you're doing it and who you're doing it with, I don't think anyone really believes it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Prama, and it leads me into sort of thinking about a question I have, if you don't mind me, Akhil, taking on your role a bit.
Go for it.
It's a bit risky, but I have a question on how sensitized your customers are, Prama and Margot. And I appreciate, Prama, some of your customers are B2C and sort of not direct to sort of consumers, so to speak. But in terms of being able to talk about sort of risks and challenges within your within your business, but also in terms of what you put out into the market, so what I mean is do people want to see something that's, that's labeled, that's got this sort of badge of proof of identity, and or are they willing to go on journeys with you? So if we're talking about cotton and transition, for example, which can be quite a complicated topic, and you're not able to get the badge there, and are people yet open to understanding that opportunity, or is it a harder sell?
I'd also like to add one wrinkle to that question, Liesl. Thank you so much. It's like, how have you felt it different when you're selling to businesses versus like the everyday consumers?
Wow, these are really good questions. Is it okay, Margot? Shall I go first? Or do you want? Yeah, okay. I think there is no such thing as one typical customer, whether you're a business or you're a consumer. Everyone is somewhere different. So we will find some customers will be asking us the sorts of detail that we'd be like, well, I hadn't even thought about that, oh, that's a good point, so we're learning from them. And there are others who are just like, can you tick this box? I just need you to tick this box so I can show my customer that it's sustainable. That's it. I really don't care about the rest. So there's a myriad of different approaches. And I think I'm so glad you brought up the in transition to organic story, because that is a really important piece. And one of, it's something that we've really got behind. We've learned loads from Textile Exchange about it. And, if you go onto the Mantis World website, you'll see a whole load of, you'll see a blog post all about in conversion, as we call it, to organic cotton. And in that, we're very honest about the issues with organic, the supply squeeze and the demand burst, and what we believe needs to happen to be able to solve this for generations to come. And I think, again, it just really depends on the individual customer. That is, how much do they really want to delve in and learn and understand? And others who just are like saying, yeah, where's that badge, if you like. And I think the difference between, Akhil, your question, selling to business and business to consumer, is when you're talking about business to business, if you can actually engage that buyer and you can actually engage the person who is making, purchasing decisions for thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of garments, there is so much potential for impact there versus trying to tell that story 10,000 times to different consumers. So there is I guess there's more opportunity to create impact at scale when you're talking business to business, but then again, you're also talking to people who perhaps are not that educated or engaged or involved. So it's it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, I suppose.
Yeah, I would, I'm laughing to myself as you are responding to this promo, because we see something similar with our consumers. There's such a range. I mean, there are definitely people who ask us incredibly pointed questions about, every single ingredient in the products, which we love. Then there are also people who just, they want to see the certification logos. They're happy with seeing GOTS, with seeing, goals, organic latex, or, Fair Trade USA, whatever it is. That gives them a lot of comfort. And, we've put a lot of resources into sort of explaining what the certifications are. So, I think one way we've approached this is through our social channels. So on one hand, we have a content hub on our website that includes a blog called The Thread, where we can go a little bit deeper and explain some of those stories and the content, versus, on Instagram, where it's, highlighting the certifications, things that are a little bit, more graphic, quicker to get. But I think one thing that in your question, Liesl, that I think is a challenge to transparency is just the complexity of, how products are made, what the impacts are. There's an incredible amount of complexity, and to explain that requires a balance that I think at Coyuchi we're constantly, trying to find, where we want to be thorough, we want to explain things, but we also don't want to overwhelm people with all the details, and we also don't have all the answers. So there's a degree to which we want to, tell a consistent story and not have to get bogged down in things that, your average customer, Coyuchi customer, might not find so valuable. So it's challenging. We haven't had to really go into the in transition story, into things that are a little bit more nuanced. We've had a product that used in transition linen, which linen is a very small portion of our business. It gave us a sense of sort of how to frame the story, but as a company that sells mostly organic cotton, we'll definitely have more learnings when we start using transitional cotton. So it's a great Liesl and Akhil, those are great questions. They're definitely relevant, and they're things we'll be experimenting with over the next 6 to 12 months.
Kind of staying on that question, Margot, and thank you for that answer, is about the communication of the transparency as well, right? When you're moving towards a point where you have different customer groups, like there is a balance in terms of giving a lot of information and making sure it's authentic, doing an LCA, doing that credibility, versus, giving too much or giving too little, right? So from your experience, like between different customer groups, what have you found? What are some of the key learnings from all of you? And I know Textile Exchange has also worked on those kinds of projects before. I remember there was the About Organic Cotton page where Green Story had a little calculator as well. So I'd love to get your thoughts and your experiment so far, because I don't think anybody has a real answer. We're just learning right now.
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in quickly and just mentioning I guess the journey I've seen happen over the last 10 years in terms of communications. And Margot, I don't know if you'll agree, but there wasn't so long ago that the conversation for the consumer, right, around organic was really about safety. It was ideal for babies. It was a safe product, and not to diminish that story. I fast forward once again, and Prama's writing blogs about, and I love the supply squeeze, demand burst, Prama. These are really sophisticated, and sure, it's in the blog, not in the Instagram, but Margot, on your site now, the kind of sophistication of the story about regenerative agriculture, and the sort of circularity system that you're innovating in. I think in all of these cases, it's not just about the sophistication of the story and the pitch that you're able to make now to the average consumer, or the consumer that's wanting to read further into the products and the messages behind the brands, but also your SMEs. You're very relatively small companies, and you've got these really strong, clear, sophisticated stories. And I say it like that because it's a lot of work to be able to build the infrastructure behind those stories. And we hear a lot at Textile Exchange. A lot of the business models, or the programs that we're supporting, require a lot of resources, a lot of work. Our corporate benchmarking program is a lot of work, and for big companies that are disclosed, even for big companies, but that are disclosing information as publicly listed companies, being able to answer the surveys we put out and sort of contribute to that program, quantifying the volumes of materials that are being used, et cetera, it's quite a lot of work. So just to kind of summarize what I'm saying here, I think there's a sophisticated story, and it's interesting to see a lot of that, not just the innovation that a small company represents, and that may be the more nimble mindset, but also the depth of data and communications. And just to top that off, Akhil, I think the product that Green Story provide has really leveraged that opportunity. So yeah, great to see the kind of the SME model just really hopefully sort of strengthen and provide that leadership.
Yeah, I'll just say from our side, I really like that, Liesl, the number of resources that you're mentioning, and just the work, the sophistication of the data behind what we're trying to do is so important. I think when I think about our communicating transparency, how easy or not is it, what's sort of working, what's not. Partners are so important to our ability to tell stories and have the confidence to try to tell a story. So Green Story and Textile Exchange, you guys provide us with really key resources for having the ability to even go out and try to quantify and support what we're trying to do. We also have we rely on information from other partners as well. Fair Trade USA, Fiber Shed's really important. You mentioned regenerative, Liesl, and we have White Buffalo Land Trust. So part of our approach to our work is definitely to choose to bring in partners who we trust. I think that goes a long way in being an authentic brand and telling an authentic story. So even if we might not know, even if, you know, data sets change or there's a data gap, I think trying to address that altogether is a more, you know, is an important part of how we're going about this. So that when we do share longer form stories or develop shorter ways of sharing, whether through video or, you know, through Instagram posts, that what we're conveying has real backing to it as much as possible.
Prama, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I kind of just agree with all of that, all of the above. I think the only thing I would say that what I think really makes a difference is being able to show your data in a way that is very clear, that is like objective, as objective as we can, as you know, Margot says, with given that there is no such thing as perfect data, but with the data that we have to be able to present it in just facts and figures. So, you know, and that just, I think for those of us who've you know read through long CSR reports from different companies and brands, there's lots of flowery language, and you can just cut through all of that by just presenting a few key data points, and I think that's really important.
It's getting the mute button there. So yeah, thank you for that. It's really amazing how the space has evolved as well. I remember when we started Green Story, we were the only company almost doing what we do, especially for SMEs. If you had to do an LCA request or like do something like that, you had to have a Qantas or a massive company come over to do the whole project, and it costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's changed quite a bit in time. And the system has become a system rather than 2 or 3 pioneers trying to do what they do. So I guess my question is, like, especially for organizations like Textile Exchange, what are some of the initiatives and tools out there that you're helping your members with to kind of help them along this journey? Because for a lot of the people that we speak with, Textile Exchange is a knowledge hub. That's their starting point on everything, in a sense, as they move along this step. There might be some conventional cotton and they want to make that transition. So first place they typically go to is Textile Exchange to understand that. So Lisa, that's a lot to place on a company or on an organization. So I'd love to know how you're handling all of that.
Yeah, thanks, Akhil. It certainly is an exciting time at Textile Exchange where we're growing rapidly. Everybody's interested in raw materials now, and of course that requires a level of transparency and line of sight to where materials are being grown and sourced from, and the risks and opportunities that are getting more aligned with thinking about landscape level concerns. We used to sort of think about, well, we still do, but sourcing materials in a supply chain, in a kind of, if you like, in a silo, and now we're having to sort of think about, okay, if I'm sourcing from Turkey or I'm sourcing from somewhere in Africa, what do I need to understand about the opportunities in that region? I think this is kind of where we're heading next. But what we've always done, I think, is try and create those conversation starters, even if it's something as kind of structured and controlled as a standard, as a global industry standard. It's really about the conversation that the development of that standard opens up and encourages and kind of builds capacity within the industry through that whole process. It's that kind of proverbial journey as much as the destination opportunity. So whether it's standards, whether it's data and LCA, and we know, as Prama and Margot have both said, and Akhil, your program certainly supports, is data can sometimes speak 1,000 words. It's really important. It's really important. We're all guided by this North Star of 1.5 degree, aren't we? This pathway for climate change. So everything else needs to kind of ladder up to that in a way. Of course, there's obviously loads of co-benefits with other data, millions, but just to say data is super important. I'd also say data is dynamic. You know, we can only do the best we can with what we know at the time, and keep this improvement cycle or you know, process in mind, because data is dynamic, and climate's dynamic, soil systems are dynamic. You know, we won't have perfect data, but we can model it, and that modeling can help guide those conversations and make them crisper. At the same time, we know we're going to have increasing droughts, you know, floods. We're going to have huge shocks that will impact data. So these stories that the data enables, you know, just to kind of almost backfire on Prama's point about cutting to the chase, which data provides. And I'm not actually arguing that. I'm saying that the data can shine a light, and then we can talk about, well, you know, what are our mitigation options? What are our support options? You know, what do we do to bring the good data to other places? You know, what are the stories that we can learn and share and adapt to different places? So yes, it's really about getting back to what you were asking me. The tools are the conversation starters. The other big piece that the other big tool, if you like, is our roundtables, which are really about convening platforms. The benchmarking program is really about looking at what does it look like to source responsibly and build a portfolio of materials and sort of drive progress in performance and impact. So that's, if you like, the roadmap that we've put together for companies on that journey, which highlights gaps and opportunities and ways that we can report back and support them on that journey and share with others. So that's a major tool that I think we will be seeing grow as more companies want to align with that work. And then increasingly, you know, other companies are looking for ways to make decisions about which materials to source. You know, Margot and Prama are strong cotton users, and you know, and have got clear cotton goals. And Prama mentioned, you know, that challenge process around organic cotton or more sustainable cotton that's driven her company. So I think the other thing we'll be continuing to do is increasing and improving the tools to help companies make those fiber choices. Once again, it's not one size fits all. It's often the journey and not the destination. What might be right for one company now might be right for another company in 5 years' time, you know. So we need to act fast, and we need to kind of get on the right track pretty quickly. But there will be, you know, that kind of need for flexibility and opportunity to kind of steer in the right direction. So yeah, lots of tools coming out of Textile Exchange at the moment as the interest in fibers and materials grows. So stop there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Liesl. I think one thing that came that you kind of brought to light was it's not about just the fashion space. It's not about purely about, like, you know, selling more items. This is fitting into a broader focus we have globally to help reduce impact, the 1.5 degrees and all of that. So as this has become more of a focus in legislation, and you know, the more governments have gotten involved, and this is a question for all of you: have you found that the upcoming legislation and government programs have over time become more of a help, or has it enabled you to be more transparent, get more data, and be more sustainable, or has it been maybe a hindrance? I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
And I'd love to add to that. I know we haven't got a lot of time left, but I wonder, Prama and Margot, if you wouldn't mind also just adding on any thoughts on the fact that we are trying very hard to shift our industry around. But of course, your retailers or your companies looking to sell a product and needing to kind of run a business. So whilst we all want to maybe do the right thing, sustainability wise, how difficult is that to align with, with building a successful business? Maybe that's more than the 5 minutes we've got left.
I'm going to talk really fast in that case. I think, Akhil, your question about legislation is very interesting, but I think we haven't really seen the start of it being, the big challenge that it is going to be. So, for example, if I look a few years ago, REACH was introduced into Europe, and everybody had to comply with that. And those of us who had OEKO-TEX or GOTS or whatever certification were already on an advantage, right? Because we knew we complied. What's coming up in the EU is this idea of having like almost a digital twin. I think we talked about in our prep call, so that and they're starting with garments, right? That's because the EU lawmakers know that this industry is particularly one that needs to be looked at. And what we're going to see is where you're going to have to disclose your impacts on carbon emissions. You're going to have to show transparency. There is going to be coming up legislation where there are certain words that you cannot use because they have almost become meaningless, whether that's sustainable or whether that's ethical or responsible. You're going to have to show a lot more detail into what you actually mean and what are you comparing it to. So this is all coming our way, and I think that part I think it should be welcomed by all, because that will help cut out some of the greenwash that we see. Liesl, your question I think is a great one. It takes me back to that the opening session at the conference in Dublin recently, which is about degrowth. How can we continue to run successful businesses when the capitalist model is on constant growth? Well, I think what makes the most sustainable garment there is the one that you've already got and that you're going to use again and again and again and again. And I think that is a key piece, is to be able to design for longevity using better fibers and treating everybody in the supply chain better. Does that mean that we're going to pursue a policy of actually we need to sell less? No, I don't think so. I think what we need is that the whole industry perhaps needs to shrink. But those of us who are doing things in a better way, hopefully we're going to start seeing our share grow, because people will be put off by some of the big fast fashion, cheap, churn it out as quickly as possible, throw it away, it ends up in landfill after one or two wears. So I think that's what we're going to see, is we're going to start seeing a shift. So, my hope is generally that the pie will shrink, because we don't need as much as we will buy. But the slice of the pie that is going to, companies and brands that are behaving more responsibly, their slice will grow. Is my hope anyway. I don't know, Margot, if you feel the same.
Yeah, I like that positive note for sure. Yeah, I think at Coyuchi we have our second home program, which includes a take back portion. Something that we've started to do more since that started in 2017 is really think like, how do we take responsibility for as much of what we make and are selling as possible? I'll just say really quickly, there are definite challenges that still exist. Akhil, you mentioned the supply chain challenges earlier in the call, and those are still happening and have an impact on product. And so we are seeing lots of opportunities for us to take something that another company may say, we can't sell this, we're going to get rid of it, it's going to go to landfill, and having to challenge ourselves and say, well, how can we keep this within our business and still retain value. In terms of legislation, I've learned actually from the Green Story webinars that have covered some of this more recently. There's not as much that I see happening in the US. Certainly here in California, there are laws that have passed or either being considered. I did see that the FTC has the green guides, and those are supposed to be going into review starting next year, which I think could be an enormous help, especially if it's anything similar to sort of what the CMA published for the UK earlier this I guess in the fall. So I'm really looking forward to sort of what comes of that review process, because I do think it will help to have areas addressed that aren't currently, because right now, for instance, organic we're really relying on GOTS to sort of shape our messaging around organic and certified organic product.
Fantastic. Almost out of time here, but we might have time for one more question, and I think it's a good one that came from Bruno, and it's about traceability for conventional cotton. And because organic cotton with the GOTS standard, there is a paper trail and there's definitely more focus. Is moving forward, is there any kind of initiative for traceability more for conventional cotton as well, to ensure like the viability of it? It still makes up the bulk of production globally. So does anybody have any insights on that?
I don't have like a proper insight, but I'm not surprised Bruno's very active on the chat. Thanks for the question, Bruno. I'll just go back to what we were doing when we were buying conventional, and we wanted to make sure that it wasn't coming from areas with human rights abuses. And we really relied on our supply chain, and we basically said, you have to make sure that you tell us where the cotton is coming from. And what we did is we put it, so we always labeled our garments, for example, that the product was made in country X and where the cotton came from. The cotton was from India or the US or Tanzania or wherever. That was not coming from a place of a clear certification, sort of formalized approach. It was more just us doing what we did. And, I don't know if there are certifications and chains of custody, but my kind of question to you would be, well, if you're working in conventional, then you're going back to a globalized anonymous commodity model. And maybe it starts stepping into, all right, organic maybe is the goal that, the gold standard, but, maybe you want to step into some of the other cotton initiatives that very well are out there. And I don't know, Liesl, if you've got any other thoughts on that. I'm just unfairly picking on you there.
No, I think you answered it really, really well, Prama. I think there are increasing models or systems that are looking at provenance, or where a particular, if it's an Izmir cotton or an Egyptian cotton, or ways of being able to identify the country of origin, but which might satisfy some of the sort of the technical traceability or kind of input requirements, but does nothing for really understanding risk and opportunity and relationships and the authenticity of the supply network and the things that we need to build more resilience into supply chain. So yes, maybe technically there could be more ways of tracing, but in terms of helping a company sort of strategically work in partnership with suppliers, you won't get that. I would argue. I know we've gone over time, Akhil. Sorry, I gave some pretty long-winded answers, but I've really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, wonderful to to have it.
It was great. No, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate all of your responses. We're 5 minutes over, so really appreciate your time and spending the extra time answering some of the questions. For the ones that we couldn't get to, I'll try my best to send them over email as a summary. And for anybody who's missed this or wants to listen to some of these wonderful insights again, we'll be sending out the recordings to all registered participants. So be on the lookout for that. But once again, I'd like to give my thanks to Prama, Marco, and Liesel for spending such an important time of the year sharing their insights with us. So thank you so much, and we'll see you all next year. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.